Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us for our webinar today. First thing I want to do is give everybody an apology. Those of you that have been able to get on, we had a snafu and we didn't know about it until just an hour ago, but we changed our professional account settings with Zoom. And when we did so, we had no idea that we would eventually just lose our event that we had planned. And so, all the old stuff that we had up that we've been sending you for the last week, it was no good. And so thank you to those who found the second email and have been able to join us today. We had 91 who were going to be on the call. Hopefully we'll have as many of those as possible. Some may be joining us, and the presenters know also that we've got a couple people that I think are going to end up joining us by phone. So some people may not be able to see the screen. So again, thanks everybody for joining us today. My name is Steve Kortz, and I'm the Northern Colorado coordinator for Little Help. And I work up here in Larimer County and parts of Weld County for A Little Help. And I was pleased and delighted to be able to host today's webinar around planning for what happens after we pass on, or what happens even when we have medical emergencies. And I'll be introducing our panelists here in just a moment. I want to do a couple of things real quick from a housekeeping standpoint. First off, I'm giving everybody permission to take a bathroom break whenever you want. I figure you know the best place to go, so go do that. And if you want to have snacks, you have my permission to go to the kitchen. Feel free, just grab some milk, get a cookie, whatever you can. The whole idea here is to relax. You don't need to raise your hand. You don't have to ask for permission. We're in good shape. I also, it's going to be kind of fun at the end of today, but our CEO, Hillary Simmons, has joined us, and she's going to have a special announcement for everybody at the end. And I'm really excited about what she's going to say. And finally, for those of you that have questions, there was somebody that already did ask a question. I've given it to one of our presenters to talk about. But if you do have questions, there's a chat box on the bottom. Please write your questions in the chat box, and at the appropriate times, we'll try and get those questions out to our presenters. And if we don't get them all answered by the time we're done at 1 o'clock today, we'll be happy to tell you and give extra time. The panelists are going to stick around and we'll answer questions as long as you keep chatting and can stick around till after 1 o'clock. So I think all that's going to work really well. So our presenters today, our first presenter is going to be Sean Kennedy. He's the CEO of Legacy Foundry. Our second presenter is going to be Kate Kishline, a retired attorney and also a mega volunteer star for A Little Help. And our last presenter is going to be Mindy Rickard, who's the project coordinator for Larimer Advanced Care Planning with the Larimer County Health Department. But first, I want to bring on Sean. Sean is going to help us prepare to prepare. So Sean, if you want to explain what I meant by that, take it away.
I'd be happy to. Okay, let me make sure that I'm sharing everything correctly. Okay. All right, well, thanks, Steve. And thanks to all of you who hopped on today. As Steve mentioned, my name is Sean Kennedy. I'm CEO of Legacy Foundry. My company creates software that helps families have the difficult conversations around two of the hardest topics out there, death and money. I'm going to focus on what I think is actually the hardest part about all of this end-of-life planning stuff, which is talking about it with family and friends. We all know we need to discuss this with loved ones. 92% of us say that this is important. Yet only 32% of us have actually ever had this conversation. So what's going on here? Before I attempt to answer that, let me take a quick second to explain how I got involved in all this. So my previous company was acquired in 2018, and shortly after, I got an invite to a program called 10-10-10. It's a social impact org where they bring together 10 serial entrepreneurs for 10 days to work on 10 wicked problems. They surrounded us with about 150 volunteers, a lot of them thought leaders in the spaces of each wicked problem, and basically just told us to have at it. Now, the wicked problem I fell in love with was our unwillingness to have the conversation around death and dying and the cost that has on families, both emotionally and financially. but also on the healthcare system in general. And we heard so many horror stories about what happens when families don't have this conversation. But we also heard a couple really positive stories about what happens when you do have the conversation. You get a chance to face mortality together with loved ones. It can be an incredibly positive experience. And that's how I got passionate about this project. I was forced to face my own mortality with a cancer diagnosis in my late 20s. And during that crazy, brutal time, I mean, you can bet my priorities got crystallized. But I also really learned who my family and my tribe really were. Opening up about that fear and that uncertainty brought me so much closer to the really important people in my life. And it was really the memory of that time that hooked me on this. You know, I then spent the last couple of years learning as much as I could about this problem and working to solve it. So let's start with why it is so important to get all your documents in order and to talk about the decisions in these documents with loved ones. Every horror story you hear of when the family doesn't have the conversation is going to be unique. But there are common themes that go throughout this. Typically, you'll have a family with, several kids, and a lot of times it's the youngest, and often it's the youngest daughter, ends up being the caregiver for, say, mom. Right? So she takes mom to the appointments, understands the most about her tolerance to treatment and quite a bit about mom's definition of quality of life. But then an emergency happens and the prognosis is bad, right? So then the older siblings all fly out. Everyone starts hunting around for paperwork that nobody can seem to find. And they do find that the oldest son is listed as the medical power of attorney. So the decisions of what to do then fall on him. And this is a time where everybody's stressing out like crazy. So nobody's thinking straight, making great decisions anyway. Now, he hasn't experienced the treatments like the youngest daughter has, so decides to take every action possible over her protests, knowing mom would have hated that. But he can't handle the guilt of making a decision that mom really should have made in the first place and documented, right? So the family starts fighting, and it gets worse after mom does pass, because the kids aren't really talking to each other at this point. And this is when the family finds out that power of attorney doesn't apply to the dead. Power of attorney only applies to living. So now some of the financial assets that aren't directly called out in the will, which was written 15 years ago, now have to be settled in probate court, which ends up taking years. And so this makes the rift between the kids even wider, and then fingers start getting pointed. Right? And it isn't until way later that everyone starts wishing that they had more to remember mom by. So to avoid this, Mindy and Kay are going to talk a little bit about those specific documents you need in place. But the documentation only covers the top level stuff. You really need to have a conversation about these key elements, the medical wishes and advance directives, all that financial stuff. But then what does the family do as age starts to take away things like independence? And also discuss some legacy. Right? What wisdom and stories do you want to pass down to the next generations? Now, I'm sure most of you have heard these horror stories and even experienced some of these pains. But chances are you're going to leave this presentation, you're going to leave this webinar and push this conversation down the road again. And the most common excuse I hear is, well, I don't want to be a burden to my kids and grandkids. And while that is incredibly well-intentioned, you become a burden when you don't have this conversation. So I'll ask again, what's going on here? Because the data tells us 95% of us say we're willing to have this conversation, but we're really hoping somebody else starts the conversation, which makes sense, right? Because when the older generation, may have tried to start this conversation, what do you normally hear? Oh my God, why are you telling me this? Are you sick? Right? And the younger generation doesn't know how to start this conversation for fear of coming across looking like a gold digger. So that is a part of it, but it's only a small part of it, turns out, because we dug deeper. We sent out a couple of national surveys of our own around several of these end-of-life conversation topics. And these are the results we got back for why people resist this conversation. It's not a matter of being too busy, and it's not really a distance thing. Turns out it could be problematic family dynamics, and sometimes it's that we're uncomfortable sharing feelings about this topic. But the clear winner is no one feels that this is urgent. It's clearly not urgent because we're all going to live forever, right? So we continue to kick this can down the road until one day when it's too late. So then we try to figure out, okay, well, what could possibly increase the urgency? We asked if managing someone else's death would do it. So say you're a caregiver for a parent or a family member. And in our samples, it turned out that didn't increase urgency at all. So surely having a chronic disease will get folks to get this documentation done. And it moved the needle, but only 2%. So 2%. So we dove into what those chronic diseases were because, bunions could be a chronic disease, right? But no, the majority of the chronic diseases were very serious, things like cancer. So if even cancer can't increase the urgency to get this done, what is going on here? And the most common answer to when people would have this conversation when we ask that question is, I'll discuss this with my kids when I know I'm dying. And since we're all dying in some form or another, this is really just another non-answer. So to understand what's actually happening requires us to dive into human psychology. So let me ask the question, do you remember when you first discovered death and then had that realization that it would happen to your parents and worse, it would happen to you, right? So you started asking questions about it, maybe when your pet goldfish died, but none of the answers you got were anywhere near satisfactory because it's an almost impossible thing to process, but at least it's a long way away. So you tuck it down with the monster under the bed and try not to think about it too much. And this is completely normal. In fact, there's that full branch of psychology dedicated to this death anxiety called terror management theory, or TMT. So with TMT, imagine if Freud was obsessed with death instead of sex. That's basically the premise, right? Fear of death drives all actions. And humans are unique in that we have the intellectual capacity to understand death, but also the cognitive ability to look in the future far enough to know it's going to happen to us. That's the catch to these big brains we have. Knowing we're going to die. Your dog doesn't need to worry about that, right? Lucky him or her. This will continue to be an uphill battle because this stuff is hard, right? Recent studies have found that we are hardwired to avoid thinking about our own mortality. So this makes the not urgent response a lot more understandable because we want, with every fiber of our being, for this conversation to remain not urgent. So what do we do about it? How do we get the ball rolling? Well, TMT tells us that humans manage the problem of knowing we're mortal by calling on two basic psychological resources. The first is being able to fall back on our cultural worldview. It's this desire to assert the superiority of our own group over other groups. And a perfect example of this is COVID, right? When we were collectively presented with our own mortality, what do? Did we come together in a kumbaya moment to try to beat this virus together? Not even close. We dug in. We got even more polarized. We doubled down on the faith that our side was right. So why is that so important? Because our cultures and our cultural worldviews offer hope of symbolic immortality. It's that sense that we're part of something greater than ourselves that will continue long after we die. Now, the second way we manage our mortality is through a feeling of personal significance, really just a sense of self-esteem, right? And self-esteem shields us against those scary rumblings of dread that really sit behind every experience. It enables us to believe we are enduring, significant beings rather than material creatures just destined to be obliterated. And there is a third, slightly less cited tool in the academic literature anyway, which is interpersonal relationships. And this one is a little more obvious as we fall back on these in times of need and vulnerability, as you might expect. So great lecture, Professor. How does that help us actually have the conversation? Well, in 4 ways. So first, knowing you're hardwired to avoid this can allow you to recognize it when you're about to push that conversation out again, right? Second, know that shaming someone into having this conversation is totally ineffective. Instead, try to raise self-esteem. So for example, I'm super impressed that all of you have taken the opportunity to learn more about this stuff. And this is a huge step that is incredibly difficult. So you're already in rarefied air. So great job. Now finish it by documenting your wishes and talking to your loved ones. And third, incorporate this conversation into your cultural worldview. So say you're very patriotic. Think of this as a badge of honor, a duty to your country to help with the healthcare problem. Or if you're family driven, see this as the greatest gift you can give your family. And that is how the entire town of La Crosse, Wisconsin did this. And this is one of the only places in the country where 96% of the people in town have some level of medical directive. They made this part of their culture. They take a lot of pride in it. So they've proven it's possible. And then finally, get some help, right? Understand that this stuff is difficult and get an ally to help push you through it. I would recommend you reach out to someone like Mindy or Kay. And again, they're going to go through the specifics of these documents in a minute here. But another thing you could do is reach out to another family member who you think will help you with this, or reach out to your doctor. Your doctor would be thrilled to help you through these things. And again, Mindy and Kay are going to talk about some of the details of these things. But I want to give you some conversational tips before you dive in, because you can find many more of these tips on sites like the Conversation Project. But I'll share what's worked for me and has worked for some of the social workers I've worked with. You know, first, try to limit these conversations to no more than an hour and be very clear about that time limit with all the participants, right? When you know it's going to be done in an hour, it feels a lot more manageable, right? And you can always have another conversation later, and really you should, but that first one's the hardest, okay? When you start, stick with the logistics in the beginning. So stick with the documents and the roles people are going to play before you get into the more difficult stuff. Now, the big topics need to be the medical, financial, and independence, and they need to be talked about. Way too often, we'll just say something like, well, son, all my documents are in my vault. Here's where to find the key. That's not enough, right? The documents are an excellent first step, but they don't cover the nuance of all those smaller decisions that need to be made. Only conversation can cover that. And finally, loss of independence has to be discussed. My wife is a family doc who has a lot of older patients, and often when they end up in assisted living, they're really upset with their family. You know, how could they do this to me? Right? It feels like you lost all control over your life. So the best way to keep that control is by setting the criteria of that loss of independence yourself, so that your family doesn't have to do it, right? And document, right? I will stop driving at night when this happens. I will stop driving entirely when this happens. Then you set those guidelines. All right, there's one last thing that gets in our way, and that's bias. So I'm going to close with a couple of questions to demonstrate what I'm talking about here. So in the last 20 years, the proportion of the world population living in extreme poverty has almost doubled, remained more or less the same, or almost halved. And I'll share that answer in a second. And then, what do you think is the life expectancy of the world today? 50 years, 60 years, or 70 years? So the answer to the first question is extreme poverty is almost halved in the last 20 years. And life expectancy of the world today is 70 years old. Now, I bet most of you got that wrong, right? I know I did. Turns out the more education you have, the more likely you are to get this answer wrong. Why? Because the more educated you are, typically the more you read the news or watch the news, right? And the news reports on what is newsworthy, what is sensational. This means you hear about all the bad things, but rarely do you hear about how much progress we've made. You know, the same is true about having this conversation. What sticks in your mind is the horror story, right? Yeah, you know, Karen down at Pleasant Oaks or wherever, well, she got her family together to talk about the will, and now none of the kids are talking to her or each other. And so not only do we have to overcome death anxiety, but we're also pretty worried about how the family is going to handle that conversation. Now, I've been party to about 15 of these conversations. I've facilitated 7 of them, and I've never seen them blow up. Now, granted, that is a really small sample size, but I did just interview a guy by the name of Marty Kurtz. He's a renowned financial advisor, and he said he probably had 20,000 of these conversations over the period of 35 years. And you know how many blew up in his face? 3, 0.015%. But guess which stories he was most excited to tell me? Those 3. Why? Because drama makes for a good story. So instead, the experiences I have had is that this is a wonderful, loving, vulnerable experience for everybody involved. And people leave these conversations looking actually tangibly, physically lighter, as if a giant weight has been removed from their shoulders. The family dynamic gets better because now everyone in the conversation's in the know. right? It's almost like you all share a secret together. You're in the club, and the tribe is stronger because of it. And that's incredibly powerful, and I hope you all get to experience that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sean. That was, I learned a lot from that. And it just goes to the power of communication and how you set this up and how you really do need to prepare. And thank you for that. And I was also glad to hear that we had La Crosse mentioned in there, because I used to live in La Crosse. And it is a great town, and I'm not surprised they have that kind of percentage of people with at least some kind of directive. So thank you. And again, as you have questions, please put them in the chat or the Q&A. And also, as you, if you're joining late, because I know half of you didn't realize you had to get on a different link to get here. We are recording this, and this will be on our website later, so you can go back anytime and see what you missed. And if you did miss something, I would go back and make sure you got everything that Sean said, because it was very powerful. So thank you again. Up next is Kay Kirschlein, one of my favorite ALH people of all time. Kay is a retired attorney and has done this kind of stuff before. And so we've asked Kay to kind of come in and run us through the 4 documents that everybody really needs to know and understand. So Kay, I'm going to let you take it away.
All right. Thank you, Steve. Good afternoon, everybody. I just want to kind of echo Sean that I just identified so strongly with everything he said. And I've had experiences on both sides in my own family and, of course, with clients over the years. And everything he said is so important. And I hope you'll find a way to get those things discussed with your family. My goal here is to help you see these 4 documents together because we kind of talk about them separately from each other sometimes, and it's hard to keep track of how they all fit together. So first, everybody needs a will. And oftentimes a married couple will say something like, well, we don't need a will because if I die first, it goes to him. And if he dies first, it goes to me. And that's what would happen if we didn't have a will. Well, that's true, but 2 things. Number one, you might die at the same time in an accident or something of that sort. And the other thing is that there are so many more issues. And so you need to get this will done while you're relaxed about it and can really spend some time talking about it. The first thing a will is going to do for you is put someone in charge at a time when being in charge is very difficult. But million issues come up that you really haven't thought that hard about. If you have a car, somebody's got to sign a title over to the person who inherits, that type of thing. If your house has a second mortgage or even a first mortgage on it, are you going to pay that mortgage off, or with, by selling the house, or with some other funds and pass the house unencumbered to somebody? So this person is going to have to carry out all that paperwork for you at the time. And that's in addition to anything that has to do with, processing the will itself, like probate. There's all these little tiny decisions and little tiny pieces of paper that have to be signed to carry out your wishes. So be sure that you've got a will that puts someone in charge, and then discuss with them what you want and kind of backup plans. Maybe you want to leave a small gift to the college you graduated from, but it's a small college in a rural area, and lo and behold, they went under financially a few years ago. And so now what's going to happen to that gift? So this personal representative might need some guidance on your priorities, that type of thing. You also want to address if someone on your will predeceases you, meaning dies before you, like one of your children. Do the other children split that portion, or does it go down to your child's children? What factors influence that decision? And then a will gives you an opportunity to set up a trust if you want to. If you have minor children or a disabled person that you're taking care of, that trust can be set up so that they can be cared for in a way that you feel is appropriate. Even if you have, say, a grown child, but just barely grown, and they're not behaving very responsibly yet. So you want to lock up some money for them. So maybe when they're 30, they get their nest egg instead of on the day you pass away. And someone else can make decisions, do they need the money for tuition or something like that. So you can set all that kind of stuff up in your will. The next two documents work hand in hand with each other in a way. You have a general durable power of attorney for your financial and business matters, and a medical durable power of attorney for your medical and personal health needs. So these are similar in that you're putting someone else in charge. You can put them entirely in charge or partially in charge. But remember, when you create a general durable power of attorney, that if you make it effective immediately, that person not only can pay your bills for you and things like that, and make sure the lawn's mowed, but they can also sell your house and buy you a condo in assisted living or something like that. They can buy and sell stock for you. So you want to make sure that you, number one, trust the person a lot, and number two, have similar values and understandings about what you want to do under what circumstances with that person. And, you should discuss this with your attorney and any financial advisors you have. But I often recommend to people that you make the general power of attorney effective when you become disabled. That can be triggered with something like just a letter from a doctor or something. But then the person is not running around with the power to sell your house this afternoon or something like that. They can only make financial decisions and take actions when you really are disabled. The medical power of attorney, of course, sets up someone to make medical decisions, discuss things with your doctor, access your medical records, that type of thing. And you want to make sure to name a backup. There's a tendency to say, oh, well, my son in New York will be my medical power of attorney. But lo and behold, he's not here right now. So you may want to give short-term medical access as a backup person to somebody here in town that can go with you to the hospital if you get sick some night, and can have access to you in your room easily, talk to your doctor, maybe call and ask a question. You get home, you forget which medicine you're supposed to take. They can call and ask for you because they have this power. So they can be a secondary who has power until your son shows up. He may not even come for a minor emergency. So it's good to have this backup person who can do small things or who can act until another relative that you have made your major decision maker can be on site. I tend to think, again, my own personal advice, but always discuss it with your lawyer and your doctor, that it's good to put this power into effect immediately, because nobody can order medical decisions for you when you're there saying, no, I don't want that. It's only if you're disabled and can't make them for yourself. So by having this power already in place, you can have someone able to go with you to the hospital, like I said, to call and ask for clarification on some treatment aspect, that type of thing. So this is something that you probably want to have ready and the person already given the power. The third thing is the fourth thing, I'm sorry, is the living will. And this is the document that basically deals with what we call turning off the machines. This is a situation where you're not conscious, you may be vegetative, but the decision has to be made as to, are we going to turn off the machines at a certain time? Or are we going to treat you for as long as you can be treated? And it's, I think Mindy's going to discuss with you maybe you know, how this really works in the real setting, but it will always help your power of attorney, your medical power of attorney, if you have expressed your wishes in writing that you want either to be kept alive as long as possible, or you want the machines turned off at a certain time, and what kind of additional treatment you want whenever you're just getting comfort and nourishment and that type of thing. So this is just something that will help, and it may help somebody make the hardest decision of all, which is to turn off the machines, because you've expressed your wishes in writing. And one thing you need to keep in mind if you do have the luxury of pre-planning here, is that you want a doctor and a hospital that is willing to do what it is you want done. So, you know, be sure to put that thought into where you are going if you have an opportunity to make that decision. So that's about it for me, and I will turn it back over to Steve and then Mindy.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, everybody. I appreciate the fact that you've taken the time to do that, Kate. This can be some scary stuff. I mean, you talk wills, you talk trusts, we talk documents in general, and oftentimes that gets so hard to understand. You let it almost overwhelm you before you even get a chance to go in and try and understand it. We're showing here 4 documents that she again was talking about, and how to do that. We're going to put this, this is going to be part of things that are going to go on our website so that people can come back and visit this screen again. But Kay, thank you for sharing all that. It's very important that that we hear from you and we hear about these kinds of things. And I've got something else I'm going to mention about this at the end of the presentation. Again, for those of you who have joined late, please know that we are going to be recording this. We are recording this, and you will be on be able to go on our website and check it out again. Again, we had some Zoom problems today, so I appreciate everybody who fought hard to get here. It looks like we just got about over half of the people that signed up are here. So thanks again for being great with us. Up next, I've got another great person I'm going to introduce you to, Mindy Rickard, who's got a wonderful long title. I wish I had something this long. Project Coordinator for Larimer Advanced County Planning with the Larimer County Health Department. And she's going to talk about medical directives and share a really cool video that I think is really going to open some eyes. So Mindy, take it away.
Unmute myself,
There you go.
which makes for a far better presentation when we unmute. So as Steve said, I'm Mindy Rickard, and I work for the Health District of Northern Larimer County, not the health departments. So it's a little bit different. We're a public health organization located in Northern Larimer County. But for almost the last 5 years, I've been with the Larimer Advanced Care Planning Program. And so to kind of echo what both Steve and Kay were talking about is the importance of, I'm going to talk today about a little bit about what we do in our program, but Steve did a beautiful job of talking about why the conversation is important and why we don't talk about this often enough. So the Advanced Care Planning team, we're actually on the ground guides. So we're the people that have those hard conversations, help people guide them through that process, and give people the tools to actually have their conversations about their end-of-life wishes. And then we help them document them. And then we help them get them shared with the local health systems. So We do this at no cost in Larimer County. We're also presenters. We'll go and talk to anybody at any time about advanced care planning. I'd like to say you do not want to be stuck in the grocery store line with me, because I am going to ask you if you have your advanced directives done. Actually, I just had the Geek Squad here, and that gentleman is completing his documents as we speak. So I'm really passionate about this. I love Steve's story, that how he got involved in this. I was actually, my degree is in gerontology, and I've worked in long-term care for about 3 decades. So I've seen what happens when people don't have the conversation and how it can tear families apart. And as Steve said, you know, it's a great opportunity to give your family a gift. So we provide information about advanced care planning, but we advocate for advanced care planning. And when I talk about that, what we're really talking about is a way to ensure that your wishes are known and that you have the tools in your toolbox to be able to convey them. Because as the youngest daughter of 5, I love that we got that put out there. Both of my parents had dementia, and both of them had many-year journeys with dementia. And I was actually named as their medical durable power of attorney, as their healthcare agent. And it was so nice for my family and for my siblings, but also for my parents, because we could really talk about what they would want and what would be best for them. So I like to talk about, and Kay talked about this a little bit, but I really focus on why are advanced directives important for everybody over the age of 18. Advanced directives, advanced medical directives, because I don't do the financial piece, ensures that your wishes are known. It makes sure that your doctors, that your loved ones, and we're going to talk a little bit about who do you choose to be that trusted person. You know, we talk about how it could be the youngest daughter, but do we really know that it's actually a family member? So I'm going to show you a short video that I think you'll find very informative. The big issue in the state of Colorado, and why it's important for everybody over the age of 18, is that Colorado is a proxy decision maker state. And what does that mean? That means if you don't have a healthcare agent, if you haven't executed one of those medical durable power of attorneys, that one will be appointed for you. Anybody that's interested in your care, they will have limited powers to decide your care at the end of life. I'm going to tell you a little story. I said I was the youngest of 5 kids. And so about 4 years ago, almost 5 now, I have a niece that's only 7 years younger than I am. And she had gotten her documents done. She was right on top of it. We had just started this program. And it was a beautiful early or late fall day. And her husband happened to be severely injured. He was working on an old pickup that he was restoring, and he had his head under the hood, and it flashed and it burned him severely. And he was taken to the hospital, the ambulance, and when he got there, he was intubated, so he couldn't talk, and they gave him enough medication because he was in extreme pain. He had 2nd and 3rd degree burns on his face and his neck and his arms. Very scary time. My niece called me. I went immediately to the hospital, and her first worry was, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? He didn't get his paperwork done. He doesn't have his power of attorney done. And at the time I said, well, we're not going to worry about it. They've already decided they can't meet his needs there. So they were going to take him to a burn ICU in Denver via helicopter. And so in my mind, I'm thinking, uh-oh, this could really be a problem, because this isn't his first marriage. So he has 3 adult children by his first wife. who he's been divorced from, and he has my niece, who is his second wife of 22 years at the time. He had a 21-year-old daughter, my great niece, and he had a mom and 2 brothers. All of those people would have been brought in to have to decide who would speak for him, since he couldn't speak for himself. That was a really scary part. The good news out of this is about after 48 hours, tube came out, he was able to speak for himself, and he was able to verbally say he wanted his wife to be his proxy. But his spouse would have been at the same level as everyone else. I tell that story because I think it's important for people to hear that in the state of Colorado, it's even more important than it is in other states that don't have that proxy decision maker statute. And it varies by state. In the state of Wyoming, it can go to your spouse or to a parent. Here, parents have a really hard time even speaking or getting information on their 18-plus-year-old children because they don't have that document done. So choosing that person and choosing the right person is really important. And that's why when I'm going to show you a video, and this is a great video. It's a video from the Conversation Project. And actually, the first presenter actually showed some of the statistics from the Conversation Project, which is a great organization. But this is a video about how do you choose that person to speak for you. So enjoy.
Be your healthcare proxy? Like if you need someone to tell the doctor what to? I just go with whatever the doctors say. I wouldn't want to bother them. They're so busy. Doctors know best, right?
Be your healthcare proxy? Sure, I'd be happy to. If I'm in town, check out my Instagram pics from Peru. Wish you were here.
Oh, I could never let you go. I can't even throw a plant away. As long as it's got one little green leaf. I'd be like, can't we upload her to the cloud?
Well, heck yeah! I've given this a lot of thought. Let me tell you what decisions you're best off going with. You never let them resuscitate. And if they even try to hook you up to one of those breathing machines, never! I got this! I totally got this!
How can you even talk about this? I can't, okay? I just can't. Mom, it's not like you're gonna die. No, I can't talk right now.
Oh wait, did I show you that meme from iFunny? The cat and the dishwasher? Oh my gosh, okay. So the cat's like, bleh. And then he's like, wah! Oh wait, sorry, what?
Well, hon, you and I have been through so much together. Here's what we'll do. We'll sit down, we'll get a cup of coffee, and you tell me what matters to you.
Well, it wouldn't be easy. I mean, I'd be sad, but I'd have your back.
I remember when we went through this with Mom, we really spoke for her. So I think I can do that for you. Let's talk about what you would want.
And the exciting thing is the Conversation Project just came out with a brand new starter kit guide to help folks answer those questions that are really important and share the answers with their loved ones. So that kind of tells you a little bit about, and maybe some of you see your relatives when you've tried to have that conversation. Love the guy that's crying and says he doesn't. Mom, don't talk to me about this. I think that's very, very common. I get that a lot from people. How do I start the conversation? And that's one of the things that we help people go through. So your medical durable power of attorney, as Kay said, names the person who'll be your healthcare agent. In that video, they call it proxy. You can call it advocate. It's the person that you really trust to talk to you about what your wishes are, not be uncomfortable, be a good advocate, be a good person to talk to the rest of the family so that they understand what's going on. because the medical durable power of attorney, I like to say, is a document that's kind of your workhorse of your medical advance directive. The medical durable power of attorney could get used on and off throughout your life. If you go in for surgery, if you go in for a minor procedure that they knock you out, anything that you need to have a driver to get you home for, the medical durable power of attorney can go into play at that time. So that's one that gets used on and off throughout your life. As Kay mentioned, the living will is for the end of your life. So it only gets used one time. And those times are if you are in a terminal condition or a persistent vegetative state. So the living will is actually one of those documents that's most often used as a guide. It really, as Kay mentioned, it really does help your healthcare agent, advocate, proxy. It really helps that person have a piece of paper that says, you know, I don't think that mom would have wanted a feeding tube. She was very adamant about that. So there's the living will. The other two documents that are advance directives but are actually medical orders and need to be signed by a healthcare professional are your CPR directive. And a CPR directive says that you would want cardiopulmonary resuscitation, an AED, intubation not to be done if you did not have a pulse and you were not breathing. So a CPR directive is actually one that you go over with your doctor. This tells first responders what to do if you're in Target or Walmart and all of a sudden you collapse and you don't have a pulse and you're not breathing. If you decide that you have wanted to not have CPR and not be resuscitated because of your illness, because of your health conditions, because of your bone density, whatever it may be, you want to make sure that you have what's called CPR jewelry. So this is a more high level. It's for folks that have decided they don't want to have resuscitation. Another form that is for folks that have high medical needs, have a serious illness or a terminal condition, is what's called a medical order for scope of treatment. We call it a MOST form, just to be on the short side. It also talks about whether or not you would want to have CPR, if you did not have a pulse or you weren't breathing, but it also covers what your goals of treatment are. So that may be a form as people have a higher level of medical need, that's when it's appropriate to do a MOST form. So I do services in Larimer County. So if you're in Larimer County, you can request a presentation or training or the one-on-one free assistance. Currently, I do a lot via Zoom, so I can walk people through the whole process, and I do some limited in-person appointments. Knowing that some of you are here from throughout Colorado and maybe down in the Boulder or Denver area, I put in a couple of additional resources. There's a really good website called Colorado Care Planning that does have some good information. The Boulder Conversation Project is absolutely wonderful. And then the Colorado Gerontological Society, the SeniorAnswers.org also has some advanced care planning resources available. I would also encourage you, if you're out of kind of the Larimer area, to check with whatever your home hospital is. Boulder Community Hospital, Centera, a lot of UC Health has many opportunities to do advanced care planning right there. And that's what I've got. I'd love questions.
Fantastic, Mindy, I really appreciate that. And I should also add, most counties have a Department on Aging, and that's always a good place to go to for a lot of resources for things that go on. Mindy, before we got a little bit of time,
I'm really sorry. I called Sean Steve throughout that, and I apologize, Sean.
I'm taking all the credit.
Sean and Steve.
I'll take all the credit. Thanks, Mindy.
Oh, there
Hey,
you go.
Mindy, well, before you hide yourself, and we have a few minutes, you do something fascinating around something called Death Cafe. Could you just explain a little bit what that is and how that works?
Oh, I'd be happy to. I just did my very first Death Cafe, and a Death Cafe.
Open your video again so we can see you.
Oh. Actually, this was my very first Death Cafe. I did it a couple of weeks ago, and the Death Cafe is not a grief support group. It's actually people that want to come together that are curious about death and dying, and they're curious about what happens. Every Death Cafe is different based on the people that join in. I am simply there as a facilitator to help the conversation and make sure that, people don't kind of get off in the weeds, so to speak. This particular Death Cafe was great because it is the impetus for a presentation that we're going to do, I think, in September. And it all came out of a question of what happens if my spouse passes away of natural causes in the night. What do I do if they're not on hospice? So we had a great conversation around that. I've done some research, and now we're going to get together probably at the Fort Collins Senior Center in September and do a panel discussion with hopefully someone from the coroner's office, first responders, hospice, and just that was kind of what happened with the Death Cafe. Other Death Cafes end up talking about options for end-of-life care. It just depends. So that's one of the programs that I do. We also have a book club up here in Colorado, up in northern Colorado in Larimer County, called the Book Club for Mortals. So I'm always happy to share information on that if anybody wants to start their own book club for mortals. It's been great.
Thanks so much. While I've got you on screen, there's one question right off the bat from Catherine that I'd like to ask you. How do random hospitals get this information and know who to call?
Oh, Catherine, that's a wonderful question. So I encourage you to share this information with your local hospital system, but and so that's one of the things that we do here in Larimer County. We're able to securely share your documents with both UC Health and Banner Health up here. And then that usually goes into the respective clinic systems so your doctors have them on file. One of the most simple things is to actually have your healthcare agent, whoever your agents are, have a copy of it on their phone. So take a picture of it, save that document. So if they get the phone call that mom or dad is in the hospital, when they walk in, they'll be able to show them that they have the ability to be your healthcare agent. If you travel, put a copy of it in your passport. Carry it with you. You want to make sure that you have it accessible. If you have a CPR directive or a MOST form, you should have a copy of it in your glove compartment, in your purse, just because you want to make sure that those are accessible. So great question.
Thanks so much. I appreciate that. Before we get into some more questions, and there's about 5 or 6 more questions from folks, some very good questions, I want to throw it over to our CEO, Hillary Simmons. Hillary's got some things that she wants to talk about, and I believe, Hillary, you do have the option to share your screen. You do not. Jason, can you make sure she's got that?
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate getting a few minutes here, and I'm really grateful to all of our panelists for this informational and interesting talk. I think this is so important, and the more that we're able to do in advance to share our wishes, the better our families will be in a crisis. So this is just such important stuff. I wanted to share a bit about Little Help's new program. I'm so excited that we are launching our planned giving initiative. We now have the mechanisms in place to, sorry about that,
to accept planned gifts through estate planning in multiple different vehicles. That some are listed here, including wills and trusts. We've talked about things like this today: stocks and mutual funds, property in the form of real estate, motor vehicles, art, things like that that are real, physical, tangible property, or becoming the beneficiary of a life insurance or retirement plan policy. We're thrilled to be able to accept this type of gifts to bring a little help into the future. We've seen how life-saving and life-affirming our work is, and how vital it is for a little help to be in our community, especially during crisis. We really have seen this in the last year. It's really proven our mission and model. And we know we need a little help in the future for this generation and for generations to come. So I ask you to consider us for your planned giving, as we're, in this vein of thought and talking about and thinking about the ways in which we want to leave our legacy. The first founding members of our Heritage Club will come from this initial endowment fund campaign that we're starting in 2021. You'll be getting more information in the next few months. We'll be sending out a mailer so that you have information right at your fingertips. But I invite you to contact either me or Jake, our Outreach and Development Director, directly to talk about this. We'd love to hear about your giving priorities and the options that you have to leave your legacy in the community. So really appreciate your time today and all the panelists to talk about this important stuff. I know we have some more questions to get back to, so I'll kick it back to Steve. Thank you for considering a little help to leave your legacy.
Thanks, Hillary. I appreciate that. This has been 6 months in the making, folks. That we've been working hard to make this happen, and it's going to be our legacy. Sean talked about what's your legacy, what's your personal legacy, and so we're trying to figure out what our legacy is as an organization, and this is a way to preserve that. So thank you. One other thing I want to bring up, and I always get in trouble when I say maybe, but and we will let folks know as soon as we get this. But we have been talking to several attorney associations, and it looks like we may be able to foster an agreement with some attorneys who might be able to do some reduced costs or pro bono work around developing wills and medical directives. It won't be real technical, it won't be real huge, but it's going to be what you need when you get started, and I'm really excited about that. So thanks a lot for that. And so I'm going to ask a couple of questions now that we've got going on. So Sierra, and I'm going to open this up to any of the panelists. Sierra asks, isn't there different laws in different states when it comes to stopping treatment for a person? Who would like to answer that one? Okay.
I'm trying to get back in there. Yes, there are going to be different. Woo, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Just on mute. Just start your video.
I can't seem to. There we go. Yes,
there you are.
There will be different laws in different states. They may not vary hugely, but some states are going to be more willing than others to let you pull the plug, that type of thing. So if you are legal, if your documents are legal in Colorado and that's where you lived and that's where you had them made, they are legal, but you may have trouble giving more effect to certain things. And there are certain things like presumptions that Colorado may have that other states don't have. Like Mindy was discussing about, what the power of the spouse might be or the parent. So if you know that you're going to move, or if you do move, be sure to just kind of check with an attorney there and make sure that you're doing the wisest thing for their laws.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and if it is an emergency, say you're just driving through a state and you get in a car accident and you're left in a situation in another state, in another hospital, they can always call your doctor or your hospital to get that if you don't have the director with you, right?
And if push really comes to shove, you can be brought back to Colorado.
Yep, there you go. Thank you for that. Don't go anywhere, Kay. I think there's a couple more here that you might be the best person. So Anne has a couple of questions. First off, she wants to know if we name beneficiaries on our bank accounts, pension accounts, etc., do we still need a will? And if no kids, and if there's no kids and no other large assets, can they just put everything as beneficiary, or do you still recommend a will?
I would recommend it because there's always things that, are going to fall through the cracks. What about your personal items? If you owe money, do you want to have, say, your house paid off out of other money, or do you want your house sold and the money given to your heirs? Who's going to sign over the title on your car to somebody if you want it sold or you want it given? But this is something you can really discuss with an attorney right down to the nub of your particular situation. It's going to vary from person to person as to how much you have left. When my mother died, she had a business and a home in Florida, and part of her business was in Indiana. And of course, I live in Colorado. So I had every kind of little problem it was possible to have in settling up all kinds of little pieces of property, personal property and everything from for 2 different states, neither one of which I lived in. So the will helped a lot. And the fact that our last names were both Kishline helped a lot. If we'd have been Smith and Jones, I'd probably still be trying to get people to believe I was her daughter. But, you're just going to have to discuss it with an attorney that's talking about your situation itself.
Cool. And we should also say that just because you've got a will, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't revisit it every so often, because things change in life and sometimes you forget to do that. And then all of a sudden, a wish that you used to have that you don't have anymore ends up getting executed. So make sure that you're always updating those. Anne has 2 more questions, and they kind of go hand in hand. If we draft a will using online software and store the signed will in our home, do we need to file a copy with the city clerk and recorder to make it official?
No, but you should probably check with your county to make sure that that's the case. It's not a Colorado law, but it could be something that your county wants you to do. Also, be careful about typing up wills and signing them. Be sure to get them notarized if you've typed a will. Sometimes if you write it in your own hand, then that can pass as a holographic will. But if you type up a will and then sign it, that can be problematic if there's really any challengers to your will. It's difficult to prove that everything in there is what you wanted. So, or even that you meant to sign a will sometimes. So be sure to have it properly notarized if you do that type of thing. Steve, you're muted.
Thank you. Audrey also has something that she just expressed here in the chat. She said, when looking for an attorney, you may want to consider looking for an elder law attorney or somebody with elder law attorney experience. And I think we all understand that's a good way to go. Finally, last question, and I'm gonna guess this is gonna be for you again, Kay. If you don't have children, you don't have any close friends, can an attorney be named as an executor?
I think so, if they don't have a conflict of interest in the matter. The trick would be, just discussing it with them and seeing, if they're okay with it. I don't think there's any prohibition on that unless the attorney finds some kind of ethical conflict in managing all of your affairs. But it was, yeah, I think that's entirely possible.
Right. Okay, 2 more questions just popped up. Sean or Mindy, you might have some personal experience with this too. what happens to a house if there's no will? Because we've talked about the consequences of not having a will. And I know we talked about courts and things like that.
If you hold this house with someone, like in joint tenancy or if with a spouse, then it could go just directly to them. But if you have the title alone and you have no will, then you're going to probably end up with it going by the laws of intestacy, meaning no testament. And that's under Colorado law. They would look for children or grandchildren. Finding none, they would look for parents and then siblings. And finding none, you know, we're always related to somebody. So the laws of intestacy for the state of Colorado would kick in. And, you know, you might have a fourth cousin out there somewhere that could end up with a house, or you, you know, if you don't have any relatives, a good thing to do might be to write that will and leave the house to a charity, something of that sort that you really feel strongly about.
Sean or Mindy, any other consequences to not having a will? I know that we've probably both seen people when they haven't had wills, what's happened?
Yeah, you know, I really think that Kay listed most of the pitfalls there. You know, I think it gets a little more complex when you start looking at wills and trusts and all those different sort of things, you know. And my customers, the people that I speak with mostly, are financial advisors. And so what they really try to do is they try to work with, you know, their customers to build out these estate plans, which work through, you know, a lot of the tax ramifications. But a lot of it relies on having that will first, so that you don't end up, you know, going through the government and the probate courts and all of those pitfalls, you know, which a lot of times you're going through those situations when you're already grieving, when you're already completely stressed out, right? So a lot of times people are just like, just do what it takes, you know, to get me out of this. And that's when you make bad decisions. So if you can do any of the pre-planning with the will or anything like that, you know, as Kay has already mentioned, you're just going to set yourself up for a better, and your family, you're going to set your family up for a much better situation.
Thanks, Sean. I appreciate that. It is tough, and I have lost both my mom and dad and my stepfather, and in every case, we had talks beforehand, because every time one of my parents would say, I don't want to put you in this kind of burden. Nobody wants to do that to their children. So, you know, that's a great perspective, or a great way to talk to people about it too. You want to make it, how do you want to make it easy for us? Kay.
I just want to throw in one last little functionality thing. If you possibly can, get to your bank with your financial power of attorney. Let them know who this is. Say, hi, this is my son. Or, you know what, I have no children and no close relatives, and this is my dear friend, and I've named her or him on my power of attorney. Would you like to have a copy of the power of attorney? Do you think it meets your needs here? Same with your medical power. I've had a couple of instances where, and I really don't have much living family at all anymore. So I've gone to my doctor's office with a friend when I had something serious going on and said, this is the person that you're going to need to talk to. So I want you to know them, and I want you to know that they have my confidence. And that can help a lot toward getting your person an easy way to help you. Introduce them where you can and let people know who they are.
Great advice. Thank you. I'm glad you said that, Kay. We've got two more questions, and so I'm going to leave it with these last two questions. And then if you've got things afterwards, let me know and I'll pass them along to our panelists so they can answer you personally. Audrey, you asked a question and I'm not sure I'm going to read this right. So I'm going to read it and then ask you to get back to me if I've got it wrong and go to the other question. But Audrey asks, please explain the differences on the most form. I'm not sure what the most means, but she says, I get confused as to the differences of care to keep people alive or not. If Audrey, if you could explain to me, just chat to me what you mean by the most form. We'll get back to that question. And in the meantime, Patty has one extra question about what about beneficiary deed instead of a will if you have a house? Anybody want to answer that? Okay.
Go for it. But again, I would discuss the whole thing with an attorney, because the more your situation differs from the straight down the middle norm, the more you want to make sure you've got all the pieces in place and, all the little nuances that might trip someone up when you pass away. So that's a fine way to go if it works for you. And I can't tell you personally, all the strategies that you might want to employ in your estate plan, but an attorney certainly can, and that might very well be a valid option.
Okay, Mindy, I think you had your hand up. Maybe you wanted to say something on that previous question about the form.
I'd be happy to. I can't get my video. It says admin has my video off. So I can just let you know on the most form. That's the form that I talked to you about, called the medical orders for scope of treatment. And I think what we're talking about is the first question on that form is whether or not you would want cardiopulmonary resuscitation if you did not have a pulse and you weren't breathing. But section B talks about your goals of treatment. So the first option under section B is full treatment options, which means take me to the hospital, put me on any machine, use whatever means necessary to postpone my death. And then the next one is selective treatment, which means, I'll go to the hospital if I have an infection and I need IV antibiotics or I need pain management in a hospital. I'm willing to do that, but avoid ICU. The third option is really most appropriate for those that are at the end of life and are looking for more comfort-focused care. And so it is called comfort-focused care. And that says, if at all possible, if you can meet my care needs where I live, and that can be where I live in a skilled nursing facility, in an assisted living, in my own home with a family member, if you can meet my needs there for pain management and comfort, then I want to stay there. I don't want to go in an ambulance. I don't want to go to the hospital unless I absolutely can't get everything I need there. If someone's comfort-focused treatment, and I think this may be the answer that you're looking for, if somebody's really comfort-focused, then you need to have a plan. Maybe you're on palliative care, which can be concurrent with treatment, or maybe you're on hospice by that point. So that's kind of a really quick, if you'd like more information, feel free to contact me and I can kind of walk you through it more. But that's the quick part about treatment options.
Thank you, Mindy. Thank you, Mindy. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Kay. Thank you to everybody who made it through our Zoom complications this afternoon. I really appreciate that. Again, this has been recorded and we've recorded all the questions and answers too. And you can go to our website to get the link on our website. It's simply littlehelp.org. That's all you got to type in and you'll get right there to find all these tools, including updated information on COVID-19. I know a lot of people have vaccination questions and we are doing our best to do that. Also, we have a little satisfaction poll up. If you would go ahead and just take the poll as it's up. And I'm going to leave it open here for just a little bit for anybody who would like to fill out the poll. But Mindy, Sean, Kay, again, thank you so much. And I'm sure if people have more questions, they can reach out to you. And again, we'll have that contact information. If people didn't get it today, we can get it to them later on. So again, thank you to everybody for doing that. And if people are still on and you would please take the satisfaction poll before we're done, that would be great too. So I'll say goodbye. We'll just leave this up for the polling results for about 5 minutes. So take your time to do that. Otherwise, once you're done, feel free to have a great afternoon. Take care, everybody.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you very much, Steve.
Thanks, Steve.